Yeah, that's right, Republicans. How you like me now? Joe Biden over here. I'm killing terrorists. I'm beating COVID. I'm bringing down gas prices. I'm creating jobs. And I'm passing the Inflation Reduction Act. Ho, 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 ho. Happy day, happy day.
Come on, come on, come on.
Nothing can stop us now.
According to new polling from the New York Times and Siena College, 64% of Democratic voters now say they would prefer Mr. Biden isn't their nominee in 2024, and that number jumps to a staggering 94% among Democrats under the age of 30.
The number one issue driving Democratic voters to want the different candidate in 2024 is age. They have a separate headline that says young voters in particular are fed up with older politicians.
And if they are feeling demoralized by this White House and by the Democratic Party writ large, it's not just maybe that they won't show up, but if they do, they won't vote for the Democrats on the ticket.
Do you want to see Joe Biden run for a second term?
She's going to go.
Yeah, that's an easy question. That's not going to take long. Do you want to see Joe Biden run?
I don't want to answer that question because we have not, I don't want to answer that question.
Okay.
I mean, he's the president and he has the right to run for a second term. Absolutely. But I don't want to, I'd rather you not do that answer.
You got like 2 minutes to be in the car.
Yeah, I know. I got to get to the.
Well, thanks very much.
The other thing. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Oh, boy. Yeah, okay. That's Representative Cori Bush, Democratic representative from Missouri's 1st District. Can't answer the question, does she want to see Joe Biden run for a second term? You know, sometimes I ask myself, am I being too critical of Democrats on this show? But things like that assure me, no, I'm not. Did you hear? Young people, they say they won't vote for the Democrats on the ticket if they are not the Democrats they want. That's great. If there's one thing we know about young people is they always know what they're talking about. That's exactly the thing that put Trump in office. You could put a can of tomato soup up against a Democrat and Republicans will vote for that can of tomato soup. But not Democrats. Nope. Got to be just the right candidate, which of course varies from one particular group to the next. Now you can say, well, that's more noble of the Democrats. Well, nobility got you Trump. It's that thinking that got you Trump. Hillary Clinton. I don't like her. What about that crime bill? What about her answer on the $15 an hour minimum wage? She was for it, but she wasn't for it right away, like Bernie was. Bernie was for it right away. Hillary said, no, incremental, over time. I didn't like that answer. Bernie was for Medicare for all. Hillary was for health care for all. I didn't like that answer. I don't want to see Biden run in 2024, and if he does, I'll leave the presidential election blank, or I won't vote at all, or I'll make a protest vote. As critical as I have been about certain policy decisions out of the Biden administration, you have yet to hear me say, I don't want him to run again in 2024. Do I think Biden should run again in 2024? No, I don't. But you would never hear me say that. And it's not an age thing in the sense that Joe Biden is or will be too old in 2 years. It's the job of being president. It has certain requirements, just like playing power forward in the NBA has certain requirements. I don't want to see Joe Biden trying to do that in 2 years either. I believe there are things that Joe Biden just doesn't have the energy or the stamina to do, not as a human being, but as president of the United States. And so I wonder, there are requirements that a president has to fulfill, and maybe he isn't. Maybe he's not fulfilling all of those requirements. I think there are things that are being delegated to others in the administration, things being left off his plate, which may be why he seems to be late to react to certain things like the baby formula shortage, or what's happening at the border. What is happening at the border, you ask? We don't know. Biden doesn't talk about it because he delegated it to Kamala Harris, and she doesn't talk about it. But trust me, Fox News talks about it. Sometimes it's all Fox News talks about is the southern border. And if it's one thing Democrats don't want is a one-sided conversation about the border. And that is the problem. Democrats need to realize they seem to think that this midterm election may be decided by what happened at the Supreme Court or what's happened over the past week or two. But for a lot of people, it's going to be decided by what's going on at the border. And there's a one-sided conversation going on right now about the border. Now, delegating, nothing wrong with that. All presidents delegate. You have to. But is Biden delegating too much? Is he too out of the loop? Does he have enough good people in his administration to delegate to? Or are they all doing podcasts? And I don't say that jokingly. Remember, there were a lot of positions in the government that never got filled under Donald Trump. So Biden had to fill the positions any new administration would normally have to fill, plus the positions Donald Trump never filled. So is there a talent drain in Washington, D.C.? Because there are so many other opportunities for people with a governmental background, hosting a podcast, writing books, working for a super PAC, being a media contributor. This is what concerns me or gives me pause about Biden running for a second term. So if he doesn't run, what then? I'm going to tell you, because you come here for answers, not just questions. Anyone can pose unanswered questions. But first, let's run through some news items. Then we'll get to some more of my unsolicited advice for Democrats. Man, it's hot in here. Sweating like a prostitute at the health clinic. Okay, first up, BRITNEY GRINER, WNBA star arrested in Russia for having a little cannabis oil in a vape pen, is sentenced to serve 9 years in a penal colony. Now, this is just an infuriating outcome for any American citizen. BRITNEY GRINER was essentially a guest in a foreign country. And now she's faced with serving 9 years in a penal colony in Russia. There can't possibly be a single person in this country that isn't, besides themselves, angry about this and angry at Russia for this. There can't be one person in this country who doesn't feel that way.
He went in there loaded up with drugs into a hostile territory where they're very vigilant about drugs. They don't like drugs. And she got caught. And now we're supposed to get her out. And she makes a lot of money, I guess.
No. Apparently, former President Donald Trump feels if someone breaks the law, they should be punished. That would be like the CEO of ExxonMobil saying, I really hate corporations that are greedy. Next news item. Joe Manchin and now apparently Kyrsten Sinema have agreed to the latest version of Build Back Better, now being called the Inflation Reduction Act, for obvious reasons. The bill should pass on reconciliation with no problems and be signed by Biden. The bill includes money to pay down the deficit, pay down the debt. The deficit and debt are different. Got to remember that. Pay down the debt, I believe it is. Fight climate, extend Obamacare subsidies, and includes a 15% minimum tax on corporations making over $1 billion in profits. Now, I may talk more about this bill in future episodes, but for now, all I will say is, are you happy, Manchin haters? Now you have the answer to the question, what does Joe Manchin want? Now you know. That's the question I've heard for almost 2 years now, while Build Back Better was trying to get done. Well, what the heck do you want, Joe Manchin? Why won't you just say yes to this bill, Joe Manchin? What the heck do you want? The answer, obviously, is what he wanted was a whole lot less than what you wanted. Bernie Sanders and others, this final version of the reconciliation bill that started out as Build Back Better is 90% less than what was originally being asked for. 90% has been taken out. Universal pre-K, paid maternity leave, vision and dental for seniors, all kinds of good stuff. There's too much money. Too much money for Manchin. And it couldn't realistically be paid for. But there's something else Manchin wanted that I really hope Democrats learn. He wanted to be left alone to negotiate in the background with Chuck Schumer. He wanted to not have a target on his back put there by his own party. Every time he was forced to give a position on a Biden administration policy, there was a target being put on his back. I heard Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, Morning Joe, After Manchin came out as a no on the latest climate proposal, Joe Scarborough, what does this guy want? What does he want? Now, Joe Scarborough was a politician. He was in Congress. He understands the game. All of these commentators that were going after Joe Manchin, what does this guy want? They understood the game. What do politicians want? They don't want to have to make concrete policy statements that can be used against them later, especially if they're from a swing state or a Democrat from a red state. They want their party to provide them some cover, protect them a little bit. The Democratic Party treated Joe Manchin like he was a progressive Democrat from a progressive district in California, not what he was, a center-right Democrat from a ruby red state. So that's what Manchin wanted. Just give me some cover, protect me a little bit while I work to hammer out some kind of a deal in the background. But no, they had to put him on Front Street every chance they got. And what did they get for it? 2 years of dysfunction and a meager version of the bill they originally wanted. Next, news item, Kansas voters overwhelmingly came out to vote to keep abortion legal in their state. Now, the big story here to me is how everyone is pointing to the historic turnout. Everyone is amazed at the turnout. You usually only get this type of turnout during a presidential election, in a presidential election year. Won't it be nice if we get to a place in this country where people turn out to vote all the time and we're more shocked by low turnout than high turnout? That would be nice. Next, gas prices have been coming down, and people want to know why conservative media isn't giving Biden credit for this. Well, the same reason liberal media isn't blaming Biden for monkeypox, because he has very little control over either. Now, for the purposes of the show, I try and consume as much media and information as I can during the week. Without question, the most frustrating part of that is hearing one commentator after another, one Twitter user after another say, how come Fox News isn't talking about this? How come MSNBC isn't talking about this? When gas prices were going up, it was, don't blame Biden, it's Putin's war. He doesn't have a whole lot of control over it. Or blame Biden because he shut down oil drilling. Now, neither thing was totally true. Biden did tighten restrictions on drilling. We know that because he loosened them to help bring prices down. Putin's war did play some part. We know that because it was Republicans screaming at Biden to stop buying oil from Russia after Putin invaded Ukraine. Now, they knew when we stopped buying oil from Russia, prices would go up. When are we going to stop pretending we don't recognize we have a liberal media in this country and we have a conservative media in this country? And they cover and present contrasting stories and viewpoints. That's just the way it is. We have government, Congress, politicians that are just dripping with hypocrisy and double standards. We should know that by now. The Republicans yelled at Biden to stop buying oil from Russia. The second he stopped buying oil from Russia and the prices went up, they yelled at Biden for the prices going up. We know that. We know that's how it operates. And I'm not saying you can't point it out ever. I point it out at times, but do we have to keep doing it every story, every second, every minute, every tweet? The double standard, the hypocrisy? Because it goes both ways. No one on CNN or MSNBC is asking Joe Biden to put together a monkeypox task force, and no one on Fox News is going to be applauding Joe Biden's job numbers anytime soon. All right, there are plenty more news items, but let's get to the what if Biden doesn't run in 2024? What do Democrats need to do? First, listen to this show because clearly you need help. Second, recognize and accept the reality of what country you live in. If I hear one more Democrat say, if Germany can do it, if Canada can do it, if every other industrialized country can do it, why can't we? Why can't the U.S.? My answer will remain the same as I've given before, because we are not any other country. Do you know what Germany's debt to GDP ratio was in 2019? It was 59.8%. The U.S. in 2019, about 108%, almost double. Debt to GDP ratio. Now, I'm using 2019 because of the obvious spike in 2020 because of COVID. We went up to as high as 137%. Now, a 2013 study by the World Bank found that if a country's debt to GDP exceeds 77% for an extended period of time, it slows economic growth. GDP is how much an economy produces. A high debt to GDP ratio means we're not producing enough to pay down debt, and we're thereby incurring more debt. So the debt to GDP ratio is extremely important when it comes to economic growth. And I don't know when was the last time the U.S. saw a debt to GDP ratio under 90%, much less down around 77%. So Democrats need to recognize what country they're in and start crafting policy based on what we can realistically afford and not, well, other countries can do it. Because if you really want to be other countries, then say that. Then say you want to be other countries. The first thing we would need to do to be some of these other countries, Germany, France, Canada, Sweden, wherever, the first thing we need to do, cut our population by 2/3. You got to reduce the population by about 2/3. The next thing you got to do, slash our defense spending by about 75%. That would start you on the way to being like some of these other countries. Not that those other countries are bad. France, UK, Germany, Canada, we love them. Great. But they have their pros and their cons the same way we do. So recognize what country you're in and recognize what country you're in when it comes to crafting these one-size-fits-all policies. I have heard many times Democrats talking about good policy being held up by the minority. The will of the people is being held up by the minority. In other words, maybe the vast majority of the country wants stricter gun control measures, but a handful of senators, maybe from states with small populations, prevent it from getting done. Now, this is a legitimate grievance, but the other side of the coin is the people from those small states don't like Washington, D.C. making sweeping legislation that dictates the laws in their states, whether it be laws on education, immigration, LGBTQ, or labor. There's legitimate disagreements to be found on both points. How much should the federal government involve themselves in states' governance? Shouldn't the will of the people prevail and not be thwarted by a handful of senators? It's a discussion that needs to be had, and opinions need to be listened to and respected. Not just people sitting in Washington, D.C. saying, we know what's best for everyone. One of the biggest things I think that killed Build Back Better from the start was the Democrats going on TV saying it's going to be transformational. This historic, huge bill is going to be transformational. It's going to transform people's lives. The Democrats went around saying that consistently until they figured out some people don't want their lives transformed by Washington, D.C. Yeah, but all the policies in Build Back Better were popular. All of those things polled very well, except for one. The taxes, raising the taxes. Without that, you can't do anything else. Without raising the taxes, you can't pay for any of the legislation. That's your problem. And it's the same problem you're going to run into now with the Inflation Reduction Act, because the second it was announced there was an agreement, Fox News went on and said this is going to break Joe Biden's promise of raising taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year. So Democrats need to recognize, while a lot of the ideas, a lot of the programs, a lot of the policies may be popular, it freaks people out whenever they hear, but we got to pay for it by raising taxes. Even when you tell people it's not going to be raising taxes on you, people see it as an indirect increase on their taxes, whether it comes in the form of higher cost, whether the 15% minimum tax on corporation comes as a result, or the increase comes in the form of corporations cutting back on healthcare plans, making the employees contribute more towards healthcare plans, cutting back on the corporation's contributions to people's 401k. Corporations may respond to this 15% minimum tax with layoffs. I've already seen some of that with certain businesses that had a store manager an assistant manager, and then a shift manager. Well, they said, you know what? We're going to eliminate the assistant manager position, and now the store manager and the shift manager, we're going to fold their responsibilities, the assistant manager's responsibilities, into your two positions. That's what corporations do in response to some of this legislation, some of this increased taxation. It's the reality of the situation. It's why Democrats need to listen occasionally to the other side of things. The frustration over billion-dollar companies not paying any taxes or paying very little tax is warranted. But the solutions to address it has to be more thought out than, let's just stick it to them. Everyone in this country doesn't have that same progressive, let's just stick it to them mindset. And Democrats should recognize that. Next suggestion. Don't make the same mistake Republicans are making. Don't allow your party to be hijacked by a trend. There's a trend in the Republican Party right now. The media is the enemy of the people. If they ask me a tough question, I'll call them fake news. And I don't answer questions from fake news. If you're a Republican and you're afraid you won't do well in a debate, well, just say you don't trust fake news debates and you're not going to show up. If you lose an election, immediately claim you won, and then claim you have evidence of irregularities in the election. You need to raise money? Say something that will get the attention of mainstream media, and then say, mainstream media is after me. I say this stuff as a trend because its effectiveness will fizzle out over time, and it only works on a small percentage of people. Now, Democrats don't really do a whole lot of that stuff like Republicans do right now, but they have their own sort of things that they do that appeal to a small segment of the party. And Democrats consider themselves the party of diversity, the big tent party. Well, if you're going to continue to call yourself that, you should realize diversity is not just appearance, not just diversity in race or religion. It should include diverse thoughts and ideas. I see too many politicians quick to say, my constituents want, or my constituents are telling me. I love it when the politicians say, I was just speaking to a small business owner the other day. You know, never tell you what business, never tell you the name of the person. I was just speaking to a small business owner and they told me. But you can't base policy on what a handful of people that you spoke to in a diner or that wrote you a letter or that shook your hand somewhere. You can't base policy on that. I feel Democrats have more of a tendency to do that, more so than Republicans right now. Not that Republicans don't do it too, but Democrats seem to be doing that more. They seem to be basing their policy on what they're hearing from the people. You got to remember, you're only hearing from a sliver of the people, a small percentage of the people. Each member of the House of Representatives represents roughly 750,000 people. You think they all think exactly the same? You think everyone in Alexandria, the comparison group guy, is not invited to my wedding, Ocasio-Cortez, all agrees with every single one of her policies? Of course not. So Democrats, don't get misguided into bad policy because you're not listening to the masses. You're just listening to the loudest voices. That's what's happening to the Republican Party. They have been getting pulled down a rabbit hole where they know there's no happy ending because they're being ruled by the loud minority. And they don't know how to keep their support without feeding them the red meat that they crave every day. Democrats are in danger of creating a similar minority in their own party. The people who say if they don't get the Democrats they want on the ticket, they won't show up to vote. The bottom line, Joe Biden not being the Democratic nominee in 2024 is not an option. The only way it could have been an option is if, number one, Biden had announced it in 2020. I'm only planning to do one term, one and done. Number two, at the end of his first term, he could say, hey, things are going so well. We've accomplished so much. I don't need another term. Or number three, someone emerges from the Democratic ranks in the next 2 years that's such an obvious slam dunk of a candidate, someone everyone loves. That's not going to happen. So Democrats, for lack of a better word, are stuck with Biden. So stop treating him like you treated Joe Manchin the last 2 years and you just might have a chance of holding on to Congress. All right. Do I have a minute to do some quick answers to comments? I guess. All right. Hang in there. I'll try and do this quick. All right. I want to answer some comments. First of all, yes, I know. My pretend fantasy girlfriend, Sydney McLaughlin, got married. Olympic champion, track star, Sydney McLaughlin, the girl I've been imagining, I've been dating in my mind, she got married to some guy named Andre. What kind of a name is that? Sounds like a jerk. Next, thank you for your correction in regards to Sesame Place not being run by Sesame Street. This is not 60 Minutes. I don't have a team of researchers on staff here, so I may make a mistake a time or two. You don't need to be so anxious to point it out. Now, some people took issue with my take on the Sesame Place dust-up. Didn't like my joking that we're all a little racist sometimes. Didn't like the fact that I said, hey, who among us hasn't started a sentence? I'm not racist, but just a little joke meant to entertain while at the same time making a point. Like when a black person says, hey, listen, you know I'm not racist, but I just hired this landscaping company to do work on my house, and none of them spoke English. I got to be able to communicate. Or when a Latino or Hispanic person says, I called customer service for Comcast, and some guy from East Jabip answered, I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I'm not racist, but I got to be able to communicate with people. Or an Asian person says, I'm not racist, but you could tell that person in that costume at Sesame Place was white. Well, the heck does that mean? So come on. Does it really matter? Sesame Street, SeaWorld? I listened to Roland Martin's podcast because I honestly wanted to hear an opinion that I knew was going to be different from mine to see if I was off base. I really wanted to know. Maybe I'm missing something here. I heard Roland Martin interview the lawyers representing the plaintiffs in the class action lawsuit against SeaWorld. I heard them talk about the damage that was done to these children, that they may need counseling. I heard there are more videos surfacing showing the same behavior towards black children at other theme parks. I heard they are now going to look at SeaWorld's executives and board members to see if they are a diverse company, all in the name of protecting black children, and using this moment to make a larger statement about systemic racism. So, does hearing all of that change my view? Heck no. You can take all that stuff over to the Cuomo Project. It might fly over there, but it ain't going to fly here. You know why? Because the second this story hit the national news, the second it went viral, it became a teachable moment. And the lawyers and the public started off at a level 10 pissed offness. They didn't start at a 2 and then find out there may be more videos or SeaWorld manages the parks. No, they already started out with, we got to sue, before they knew anything, any details. Like the race of the person in the costume, as I said. Do we know yet what the race of the person in that costume was? Do we know if the parents that took the video brought it to Sesame Place or to SeaWorld or to anyone? Do we know if parents who say they have videoed similar events have taken those videos or have alerted SeaWorld or any theme park? How can SeaWorld or any theme park do anything about a problem if they didn't know they were having a problem? We don't know any of this. So no, my opinion has not changed. Had this story not made it to national news, there would not be lawyers chasing dollars and holding press conferences. And what's the most likely outcome from all of this? SeaWorld will settle, the lawyers will get rich, and SeaWorld will pass a new directive. No kids get hugs. No kids. Black, white, purple, blue, we don't care. Because the next lawsuit will be, hey, that pervert, furry character hugged my child a little too long. Oh, wait a second. Let me put on my dancing shoes. Hang on. Yeah. Watch me dance. Come on. Here I go. Watch this. Watch this move. Oh, yeah. I got to start stretching before I do this show if I'm going to be dancing like this. Ooh, that feels good. That feels real good. I like that. Visit the website www.thecomparisongroup.com. Follow me on Twitter at comparison_show. Go to my Instagram, The Comparison Group. Listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, anywhere you get podcasts.
Get your freak on, get your freak on, get your freak on, get your freak on, get your freak on.
Thanks for listening.
Get your freak on.
I will see you next time.
Get your freak on.
If you'll be there, I'll be there.
If you wanna battle me, then let me know. Got the feeling, son. Let me throw you some. People, here I come. Sweat me when I'm done. We got the radio shook like we got a gun. Go, get your freak on. 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 Go, get your freak on.